Hey guys!
Hey,
Hello, hello.
so what are we covering today?
We're gonna go over the Middle Passage.
Wait, what is that?
It was the toughest part of the slave trade because the slaves were stuffed onto ships as they voyaged from West Africa to the Americas.
I heard about how horrible it was for these slaves. They were treated more like things instead of people.
I just found an interesting source about this topic that references the food and events that occurred on board.
Oh, that sounds very interesting.
I agree. Kate, do you mind reading it for us?
Sure. This source is from Piers Brendan, The Decline and Fall of the British Empire. It goes as follows. During the 2-month voyage, the slaves endured a kind of living death. They were stifled by the confinement. The irons ate into their flesh, which was wasted by malnutrition and disease. The worst killer was dysentery. It was spread by the distribution of food and communal food buckets, including such delicacies as dababab, slabber sauce, and boiled horse beans, which were supposed to induce constipation. In bad weather, a slave might find himself chained to a decomposing corpse, which would eventually be thrown to the sharks, the constant companion of slave ships.
Wow, that is truly heartbreaking, Kate. I didn't realize how gruesome and horrible those ships were. The dysentery stuck out as a large killer on those ships. Truly horrible.
Also, the fact that these men were all chained together shows how they were treated like animals. These enslaved people were stripped of their humanity because they lost their freedom of movement.
I agree. It's unbelievable how cruel people were to these slaves. The opening line where he says, "The slaves endured a kind of living death," really stood out to me, and it shows how brutal it was for the slaves.
Thank you for sharing that source with us, Kate. It really exposed us to the true reality of the hardships the enslaved people were forced to endure while being stripped from their home.
That's a great point, Madison, but it also limits us on seeing what these enslaved people had to go through before arriving onto the ship.
One source that I found that covers what the enslaved people were forced to go through before boarding the ship was by Molly Morgan's Woman of the Middle Passage, and it states, "The Middle Passage served not only to erase the slave's sense of human dignity, but the journey also wiped away the collective knowledge and cultural history of those captured. Before boarding a slave ship, captives were stripped of any physical connections to their past lives. Their heads were shaved and their clothing and adornments removed. Denying captives these personal and cultural identifiers began the process by which slaves were systematically dehumanized. Once aboard the slave ship, this practice continued. Women in particular were subjected to brutal rapes and sexual abuse during their journey. Many women arrived at the shores of the New World, carrying the children of their abusers."
This is a great source, Madison. It shows how brutal and dehumanizing getting captured was. Not only did the men experience a ruthless time, but the women also went through extremely cruel circumstances.
I agree, Kate. Although men were chained together, the women were singled out in their own way. Women had to endure brutal rapes and sexual abuse, and were forced to have the children of their abusers, which is truly awful.
This source, while exposing these awful physical attacks on women, does not reference the slaves' attempts to prevent these actions, only the abusers they endured.
I agree. We have no idea what the slaves tried to do to escape this strenuous journey. This source only highlighted the coercement by the captors. An example is when she stated that the journey wiped away their collective knowledge and cultural history. This shows how the people captured were forced to transform into someone they are not.
Good point, Kate. Also, all of these enslaved people were collectively referred to as Africans because of the loss of their culture. They were forced to forget their previous traditions and beliefs to follow the culture of those who had captured them.
Those are phenomenal points. I completely agree. These men and women were pressured into this culture and habitat, although through their perseverance, their own culture traveled through many future generations.
I know talking about the Middle Passage and slavery is a heavy topic, but it's an important part of our history because it shows who we are today, and it is something we can learn from to improve our future.
Bye, y'all. Make sure to keep on learning. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.